So, welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Paul Hughes, who is the head of direct sales for the UKISA. You're going to have to explain to me what that kind of stands for at kind of Mitel.
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast, Paul. How are you doing? And
really
what does
good.
UKISA stand for?
It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's, the way Mitel split the world up. So our region is the UK, Ireland, and South Africa.
Okay.
And I am responsible for the direct part of our business. So we have a number of direct customers and we also have a number of indirect. So I look after the direct and also wear the hat of kind of CX specialist, which is something I'll never really relinquish because it's all very close to my heart. So UKISA, UK, Ireland, and South Africa.
Perfect. When I said it, I sort of guessed, and I thought there's some sort of like there's an English language sort of like link, I guess, across those things, and then a time zone link as well, I guess.
Indeed.
But I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your background and the work that you kind of do, so we just get a bit of a thumbnail sketch on kind of like Paul.
Sure. Okay. So I have been in this industry for approaching 30 years now. I've been working with Mitel actually for probably 15, 20 of those years as a channel partner of Mitel. So where I would buy from Mitel and sell to the customer. And now I find myself working for Mitel, which is a fantastic place to be at the minute because we feel we're in a really good spot in the market with our strategy of hybrid communications. But I started selling contact centers. I think one of my very first deals was with a company called Breast Cancer Care, a charity organization. And so for me, being able to sell technology that really delivered against an outcome and made a big difference to people was always something that was there right from the start. And it's been an industry that's been fascinating and interesting and so fast moving over these last decades and continues to do so. So a long time in the industry, really love what I do, and I'm passionate about kind of the CX side of it.
Perfect. Now, there was a couple of things. I mean, there's no real kind of like, we didn't have any real set agenda from this, other than we had a kind of bit of a conversation in the setup, and there was a couple of things that you said that in the run up to this that I thought it'd be worthwhile sort of exploring because it just leads into other sort of things. And one of the things that you said, and you just alluded to it then, is this idea about hybrid. And when you were talking about in the setup, you said to me, hybrid is the new default, but it's not a compromise. And
Sure.
I was like, I wanted to ask you, can you explain to me what you mean by that? And what are the implications for brands that want to, as you say, deliver those better outcomes to their customers and also to their business?
Absolutely, no problem. Well, I think it's an inevitability in the enterprise space that you have to integrate lots of different applications and infrastructures. It's just how businesses have evolved and developed over time. So by having a hybrid strategy from a delivery of technology perspective, you're able to meet that enterprise requirement, be it delivering some on-premise, some from the cloud, some from a different cloud, and being able to wrap a service around all of that where you can actually deliver applications that are consistent across all types of infrastructure. If I give an example, I mean, we operate in public sector, healthcare, local and central government, and these are big organizations that have an awful lot of different infrastructure to support. So it's just the way of the world, hybrid. And I think enterprise simply must have and does have that hybrid strategy.
I mean, because the link to that, you can also said that, I mean, and this is something that feels like, I think you used the term monoculture when in the conversation where particularly we're talking about this sort of CCaaS sort of space. Everybody's talking about, have to go to the cloud and everything's to the cloud and all these different sort of things. But actually, you talk about this hybrid CX is the most important thing, and you can deliver enterprise grade flexibility without having to go kind of down there. And the thing that I find it really interesting about that is it runs kind of counter to some of this dominant narrative. And I think you describe it as this kind of monoculture. I mean, can you help me understand a bit more about that?
Well, yeah, certainly. Okay, well, let's dive into hybrid a little bit more and why it works so well. I mean, hybrid basically in enterprise with mission critical services,
Mm-hmm.
you have to have a blend and a mix of architecture and applications that you provide choice and flexibility and compliance to those organizations. Now, part of that might be public cloud. It might be an element linking you to a collaboration tool that might sit in the cloud, or even a contact center service. But there'll always be elements that you've got to support that cross borders, that cross sites and cross, technologies.
Mm-hmm.
So the hybrid, the CCaaS monoculture or the UCaaS monoculture, what I meant when I referred to that is that there is a narrative to say, get everything into the cloud as quickly as possible. We'll manage it all, take all the headache away, and life is good.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of misses an awful lot of real life scenarios, as I've mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
that hybrid answers. And that is, well, hang on a minute, is the cloud compliant? Can I access from everywhere and provide a consistent service? How about supporting these devices and applications and servers that are absolutely necessary? They sit on site. Can I integrate with them?
Mm-hmm.
And often the answer is no, or you can, but it's extremely expensive. So then this idea of getting into the cloud cheaper, faster, quicker, just doesn't really work. Don't get me wrong, Adrian, I'm not talking, and I'm not anti-cloud at all. It's just about being able to provide the choice with this hybrid infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important. An important point is that ultimately it's about the customer and what the customer wants to do and what the customer's kind of reality kind of is, and also that they kind of there's also a reality. It was a fascinating kind of like stat which says something like 70% of all enterprises still rely on some legacy on-premise kind of like infrastructure to run sort of business critical applications. Yeah. And so there's a reality there. It's like, even though everybody's going like, yeah, cloud and all this kind of really good stuff is in the cloud, I think what's emerging is that particularly if you're operating in a regulated environment, or you're operating kind of cross border, and there's all sorts of regulatory and compliance kind of and security and kind of issues kind of there, is that the hybrid solution or a hybrid approach is appropriate. And it doesn't mean that people have to miss out on some of these new features and new functionalities. And when you build that sort of like hybrid sort of like architecture.
Absolutely right. Cloud is part of the answer for sure, but it isn't always the answer. And particularly in the enterprise space, as you so eloquently described, when you've got highly regulated markets, you have to meet a certain compliance. The way Mitel have kind of bridged the on-premise, some of the legacy on-premise requirements with cloud, is that we've built something called Mitel Secure Cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a kind of a private cloud, but we can deliver it, which looking like a public cloud. We've got the same types of commercials. If the customer wants to pay subscription, they can. But it's essentially moving away from this idea of multi-tenant. Everything's the same, no matter what customer you are, no matter what your requirements. So we can build a bespoke cloud environment for these organizations that enable them to link into their on-premise and remote areas.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something really quite unique. And those data center, those cloud environments, we can hand the keys to the customer in its entirety. So if they want total access to the very lowest layer of infrastructure, we can do that. Mm-hmm. Or we can provide a fully managed service wrap, and they say, right, it's yours, just make sure that service is available. So again, just choice, hitting those specific customer outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, no, I think it's important. And to be fair, it's like, it's customer centric as well. Particularly if it's about the organization, the brand, and what they want to do, and acknowledging their kind of like their preferences and their risk profile and their the requirements they need to meet in order to better serve their customers. So I think it's like, it's not forcing them into the decision. It's actually saying, your journey, you might go 100% to the cloud at some point, but right now you can do a blend of things that fits with your kind of your strategy and your infrastructure kind of like capabilities and so on and so forth. And so I think it's an important point. So it's not just like you're not just here or here, but there are options there.
Absolutely. And it'd be difficult for me and my team and our consultant-led approach to go into organizations knowing before I even ask the questions that the answer is going to be cloud.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like, well, I'm not really listening in that sense. I'm always going to just put you in the cloud. But if I can go in, taking the technology conversation, the infrastructure conversation out of it, because I know I can deliver some cloud on-prem a mix, well, then that means I can focus really deeply on the specific customer requirement,
Mm-hmm.
understand things like the culture of the organization, how technology is used and makes people feel. This is really an emotive subject. If you're putting new tools into the workplace, it's going to create a fight or flight response, right? And if I can address that directly by saying, we're here to help specifically what you require and deliver against those requirements, it doesn't matter. It's not always going to be black, Henry Ford. I don't have to choose one color, and it doesn't always have to be public cloud. So yeah, it gives me a really fresh approach and able to get really close to the customer requirement. And that's very important to start building trust.
Yeah, and so that I wanted to move on to another thing that you kind of like said, and it feels like everybody is, well, inevitably everybody's talking about AI
Yeah.
and kind of what AI can kind of do, and the potential and the promise of some of these new evolutions of the technology is fascinating and brilliant, and I think that there's such a great potential kind of there. But you also said that we feels like everybody feels like it's doing the same thing, or there's a lot of AI sameness around, and that most
Yeah.
kind of these agents and things that people are talking about just feel just really similar. But you went on to say that you think there's a way to fix that, and I wanted to understand, like, oh, fix the sameness, or kind of like
Yeah.
parse out the kind of the like see through the fog a little bit. So, kind of, what is the best way to fix the sameness, you think?
Well, it's interesting. And again, just before hitting on that specific point, I think a general comment around AI deployments, the stats, the data do not lie. I mean, most of the AI deployments have failed to deliver an ROI, and it is linked to this sameness. But essentially, it's because people were chasing the shiny object. It just
Right.
basically, the narrative was, and I heard it so many times from AI partners that we use, and also the main kind of protagonist building and driving these messages. If you don't get on this train, you will be left behind. You have to do this. It's,
Mm-hmm.
it's now or never. And then here we are a few years later, people going, well, I bought that stuff and it didn't work. And I've not
Mm-hmm.
seen any ROI, and I've just kind of lost a load of staff. And, you told me to replace and this, that, whatever. And that's because essentially they didn't do the discovery properly. Is
Right.
this required? Why do you need it? What do you think it is, first of all?
Mm-hmm.
And why do you need it? Do you understand the effect it's going to have on your employees, number one, then your customers, and then your business? So people just chased it and bought it. So that was the first thing. And it was all pretty vanilla, basically because the chatbots or the self-serve functions that initially kind of hit the market, they were all built for deflection. It was like, instead of coming into an expensive perception, expensive contact center, just deflect these calls over here and we'll deal with them automatically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that would work in certain scenarios, depending on what the specific need was, what the customer requirement was. But what it removed was context, I should say, intent, and really the ability to integrate with, the human and the employee.
Right.
And that's so important. So all AI has been driven by cost reduction, rather than experience outcomes. And I
Yeah.
think that's really the bottom line. So, we can fix that by doing deeper discoveries and creating better journeys, and forgetting about technology, understanding what the experience that you want to create is.
Right. I mean, I think that's an important kind of point to start with the end in mind, as it were, and pick the most appropriate kind of like tool.
Yeah.
And and I think if you do that, then you get a clear, if you like, line of sight to what something you said, which is kind of the ability to demonstrate ROI,
Yeah.
and that's seems to be a I mean, I do an annual predictions piece, and published a piece, and one of the key themes that came out of that was that there's this increasing pressure to demonstrate ROI, although it does feel like a bit of a perennial problem kind of right now for the CX space.
Yeah.
But you kind of talked about how you were kind of approaching there and about linking UC and CX investment to business outcomes and in particularly kind of revenue and resilience and well-being. And I wanted to ask you to tell me a little bit more about that and how you're doing that, because it seems to me that it's an area that the CX domain just struggles to do that. A lot of it's people talk about kind of correlative sort of stuff rather than causative stuff, or they're not being bold enough and trying to make those causative kind of links. And I wanted to better understand how you're going about demonstrating that ROI so that builds confidence in the solutions that get chosen.
Sure. Well, I think first of all, and it's pretty obvious statement, the best CX and also UC, any technology investment really, the best ones, the most successful ones are the ones you tie directly to outcomes. Um, but that really then means that you need to know that you're measuring the right things in terms of, what you want to achieve, what good performance is. When I was a call center agent years and years and years ago before I started selling the technology, and I still remember now in that inbound environment, the main KPI that we had was an average handling time KPI, 2.5 minutes, right? And if I knew, basically, I ended up being manager of that call center. And so if I knew that the majority of my agents were on the phone for 2.5 minutes, they would get that deal done. It was just, the main KPI, average handling time. Well, now that measurement becomes less important if you're deflecting calls to AI and you can handle tens of thousands of calls. But people might be still thinking, well, average handling time is something I need to chase. So really, that example just says, let's examine whether we're measuring the right things to understand what good looks like
Right.
in this new world. And then how do we tie things down to real business outcomes? So revenue protection, customer retention, resolution time. It could be, that compliance is also something that's absolutely vital if you're working in the financial or banking or insurance sector. So first of all, understand whether you're measuring the right things. And again, it's that discovery process that really will reveal that. We do something with our consultants that gets really under the skin of it all and start to measure these things and benchmark against industry standards, and then understand from the C-suite down, what's the North Star, the whole kind of vision, and then the strategy. Do you want to break into this market? Do you need 5% growth here? Do you need your cost reduction there? And then put those into the modeling around, whether an AI chatbot or engine or a change in workflow is going to help deliver against that. But also the thing you mentioned earlier, Adrian, which I'm really, really keen on including, because I think this gets overlooked all the time, is the well-being, the human experience, the agent. What is the effect on this new technology or a changing workflow to your employees? That's absolutely vital. Without their buy-in and trust, it doesn't really matter what the technology is or what your North Star is, your strategy. Without that, first of all, being how do we deal with this and improve it and keep it consistent, it's going to fail. So yeah, I think one thing we're doing at the start of our consultancy process, because we were very data led, and it was like going in and analyzing, this is what's happening now, we can change it by doing this, and that'll give you 5% increase X, Y, Z. Well, we're now starting with culture and trust and empathy and understanding of human and customer experience and employee experience. That's a really important thing that we're bringing into our approach.
And I think it's really important to note that they are serious dynamics, particularly in a contact center sort of like space. If you take stats like, there's some stats that says that it's nearly 3/4 or just over 3/4 of contact center leaders report that their agents are feeling overwhelmed by the amount of systems and kind of information that they have to sort of navigate. I mean, I've heard stories that some agents are having to deal with more than 10 different kind of like systems to handle just the kind of the set of routine kind of calls in some cases. And that, what people call toggle tax, being able to kind of go and understand kind of like where they need to go and how they need to go in order to do that is becomes almost like a grit in their experience.
Completely.
And that takes a toll. And I think you can directly link that to attrition.
Yeah.
in a contact center, so which is the global average right now is around about 52% thereabouts. It can go, it's below that in some places and higher in others. So if you think about how much the impact that it has on operations, this idea that you've got this kind of overwhelm, but that it might be feeding through to or driving or influencing kind of attrition, then there's a real business, has a real business cost to it, but also a very human cost to it.
Absolutely.
It's not that people don't want to come into this and not help people. I think they do. I think the key is that we've got to make sure that we are equipping people with the right sort of tools and the right sort of support and the right sort of environment for them to succeed.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think no matter what environment you're in, if there are multiple applications to deal with, you're always going to get agents very concerned with that, because it takes their focus away from doing the actual thing they're there for, which is to deliver this customer experience. I've seen contact centers where you're toggling between sort of 8 to 10 applications. It's just crazy. And there are ways to deal with that. And that brings me back to this hybrid environment that I mentioned before. We're not talking just about hybrid infrastructure. We're talking about the ability to integrate multiple tools, perhaps surfacing into one place. This single pane of glass. I think it's a little bit aspirational. I don't think you can ever get to one, to be quite honest. But if you can start to reduce from 10 to 2 or 3, then you really are going to improve the agent's experience. That in turn improves customer experience. That in turn helps the business reach their goal more quickly. And happier agents equal happier customer equals a growth, essentially. That's the thing so we've got our contact center application. It comes with an agent application, and it can either be the thing that everything connects to. But on the flip side, let's say an organization is using Teams, so many are, well, then our staff can sit in the background and integrate into that. So we give real choice in terms of where these applications surface and what the agent experience is going to be. Then, of course, you've got the CRM world. We can link into Salesforce Dynamics and all those things as well. So really practical ways of saying there's a big problem straight away. Let's solve that. And sometimes you can solve it very, very cost effectively. You're not talking about huge rip and replace. You're talking about linking things better that already exist.
And I think that what's interesting out of all this, because you mentioned earlier about context, and about how, and I think the lack of context is that things get passed kind of like over is the kind of bane of people's life. I mean, people can listen to our chat would share the frustration where somebody asks you, can you repeat yourself, or can you introduce yourself, or tell me about that, or can you tell me about a bit more about your kind of problem, or can I just put you on hold while I look this kind of like stuff up? And I think being very intentional about how you design the agent experience to meet the kind of the customer requirements, and what you can do in order to, I feel like, figure out what that is, that hybrid sort of like partnership is between the agents and the technology, to try and remove all those different sort of like kind of things. So you can surface kind of knowledge, or you can carry context, or you can be proactive with, oh, this person's talking about this policy, or this talking about this kind of thing, kind of like, can you proactively surface it to limit that up and down kind of like bit that goes on in many conversations.
This is a really good point. And I think, the fear of AI in the CX world is replace. My agents are worried that their jobs are going to go. Actually, it's like that in many, many industries. The trick to it is how you augment AI capability and resource into the overall journey, whether that is a customer coming in to buy something, or, check something, or, place an order, whatever it is. If you can implement AI without really, disrupting anything, so that while an agent might be speaking to a customer, the AI is listening and surfacing information to an agent and even to the customer, almost like, you're in a collaborative process. That's really powerful. But also something really exciting that we're involved in at the moment, right at the start of a customer engagement, this ID and verification process. Please can I have your name, Adrian, your telephone number? I just got to go through some security questions, etc., etc. This is still a major problem because I'll do it with you, and then if you need to speak to somebody else in a different area of my business, you're going to go across to them. You're going to get asked all of that again. And we're doing something now, which is again sort of part AI driven, which is around voice biometrics. And it's really fascinating. So, two-factor authentication plus voice biometrics to absolutely provide a real secure identification and verification at the point of connection into a business. That's going to really, I mean, there's big ROI there. If you can save seconds, maybe 30 seconds sometimes of a call, but also improve the customer experience at the same time. Because, once you're in the organization, having been securely identified, that's, I mean, you must have it as well. You get passed around even the same department. Oh, just got to send you over here. You've got to say the same information all over again. So that's quite exciting. But yeah, it's getting back to the point you raised initially. It's just about blending that AI technology in a way that really enhances the experience. Remove the friction, don't create more. And you need your own data source and knowledge base for that as well. If you connect AI in that scenario to the big World Wide Web, that AI can go off and get some crazy information to feed back into this conversation. But if you're controlling the source of data, then you're compliant first of all, and you are surfacing the right information. So that's really important as well. The kind of the organization of data that you're using to underpin your AI resources.
Yeah, I think I come back to the kind of the point around, too many people, it feels to me, kind of fall into a trap of getting excited about the possibility of kind of these new things that are coming on, and then they almost kind of procure it and then figure out kind of what they're going to do with it, rather than being, to repeat a point I made earlier, is like starting with the end in mind, almost like educating yourself about the possibilities of what is possible with the technology, and then spend more time. You talked about the North Star earlier, but actually the North Star is far away, right?
Yep.
But actually get really clear, spend the time envisioning what it is you would like to achieve, what you would tell a story about what the experience should be from both a customer and agent's kind of perspective. And then when you do that and you get clarity on that, then you can start thinking about, well, what can't we do now? What could we do? What's possibly a bit more future sort of like related? And then you can start building yourself a more detailed kind of roadmap about where you are and how you want to change things, or going kind of forward, rather than taking this big bang approach, which is like, ta-da, it's all going to be kind of brilliant. But I sometimes think that people need to go slower in order to go further.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Faster and quicker, and how many and when I hear a lot. It's just not always the answer. Often we will start with telling or advising, I should say, not telling, advising organizations on how they could improve things with what they've already got. We've got a huge amount of experience over many, many years dealing with thousands of scenarios. So when you go and see an organization, you can spot these trends and say, actually, this is not a technology or purchase, it's not going to help. Just do things in this way. And then you start to build trust as well. And then actually you can uncover further opportunity, and maybe there is a chance to upsell or do something. But often it's very much like, let's first of all see if we can improve the way you do things, from a process perspective. And often there's really, really quick wins you can do on that.
Yeah, and one of the final things I wanted to kind of ask you about, because you talked about, I mean, you mentioned it earlier about this kind of like, there's a lot of shiny object syndrome kind of going around right now, but actually you're trying to not do that at Mitel, and that you're favoring, rather than kind of like, wow, look what we've made, and look at what we made, and oh, here's another thing that we made. You're favoring a much more slower, sort of disciplined product strategy, because you believe that that's what customers truly kind of value. Tell me about kind of that. I mean, is that just about going as fast, almost traveling with customers rather than wanting to drag them? or is there somewhere
Absolutely.
else is going on?
I just think, if you just take that down to a human level as well, if you're getting dragged along somewhere, you always feel slightly anxious, I think. You know what I
Right.
mean? Slightly out of control. It can be a great journey and it's exhilarating, but is it really what you want? I think it's far better to be walking side by side and sort of, going each step together. And look, Mitel have been doing this an awful long time. So if you look at features, for example, there are cloud vendors, the new kids on the block, that are catching up with the features that Mitel have had in their platforms for many, many years. Don't get me wrong, there are things that we're catching up with as well. But, it's not about features at all. It's about back to business outcome. Do not chase the shiny object. They don't want constant disruption. Customers do want reliable and steady service. Simple as that. Look, like I say, there's some amazingly exciting things coming out. But innovation, there's a lot of innovation for innovation's sake. You've got to innovate. You've got to do this. You've got to put this in. And, if you don't, you'll get left behind. So just keep it simple. That's my message. When we do AI projects, for example, we'll really look at one or two specific use cases and build something that proves its value, and then you can expand further. That's our general approach for the deployment of any of our technologies.
Awesome. Now, one final thing. I mean, I know that you're kind of deeply immersed in all this sort of like stuff, and I know that I produce some predictions and trends, kind of like predictions and trends kind of piece. But what sort of trends or things are you expecting to see or emerge in the coming kind of 12 months? What are you seeing on the ground?
Okay, so two things really spring to mind, and again, we've already kind of touched on them. I think we will see less cloud purity. And what I mean by that is just, pure like jump into the cloud, hook, line, and sinker. We're just not gonna. We're going to see less and less of that, I think, in the enterprise space. It will be a more pragmatic hybrid approach where enterprise will drive the need and the continual need to integrate multiple things together. So if you've got that capability, then you're going to be in a good place. And also the outcome driven AI deployment. We're way past the hype cycle. People are saying we've spent too much money on this and it's not delivering. So, agentic AI is the current thing which can now execute tasks, and the difference is it's not just surfacing information and perhaps improving a process. It's actually executing tasks to delivery. That's quite scary but also really exciting. But you will have to even more and more prove the outcome. So hybrids here to stay for sure. We're going to see more and more of that, and much more scrutiny on ROI.
Perfect. So, well, that's it from my main kind of questions. I just wanted to say before I can go into some quick-fire ones, anything else that you want to highlight before we kind of like go into the quick-fire round?
Well, I think we covered an awful lot there, Adrian, to be honest. So, I'm interested to get stuck into the quick fire. So, go for it.
Perfect. So, three quick-fire questions. First one is, we talked about how, as you said, we talked about a whole bunch of things, and I'm always interested in getting people to boil it down to their best advice. And the way I've been doing that over the longest time now is to ask people to complete this sentence. And the sentence is this: if you want to improve your customer or agent experience, Paul says, do this. Complete that sentence.
Fix friction before you add features, and keep the human experience at the heart of your AI decisions. That's a bit of a mantra of mine, but there you go. Yeah.
Perfect. I love that. Fix friction before you can add features.
Yep. Friction before features. Yeah.
There you go. Love that. Second one, and it's a punk related one because it has to be, Punk CX podcast, is what company or brand do you think takes a more punk approach to customer experience, and why?
Oh, okay. Okay, well, look, perhaps I won't be specific with the brand, but the brands I admire most are the ones that basically take simple steps rather than over automate. They focus on clarity and trust and doing the basics right, the things that we spoke about earlier in the call. But yeah, certainly brands that keep it simple. So yeah, they're the ones I admire the most for sure.
Perfect. And one final thing, I think we can all agree, good news is not necessarily in abundance kind of right now. The world is a bit of a weird place. And so can you give me a good news story so we can end on a positive or a high note?
Well, I did know this question might be coming, so actually I did a bit of prep on this. I follow a number of podcasts, and do you know Jake Humphreys and Damien Hughes? You know those guys from High Performance? So that's one that really interests me. And Jake on LinkedIn the other day, it's about the only social media platform that I'm on. He put a quote up, and the quote was from an American female author called Glennon Doyle. You may have heard of her. She's an acclaimed writer. And this little piece made me smile, and it made me look into her a bit further, actually. So here it is. So when we hand our children phones, we steal their boredom from them. As a result, we are raising a generation of writers who will never start writing, artists who never start doodling, chefs who never make a mess of the kitchen, athletes who never kick a ball, and musicians who will never pick up their aunt's guitar and start strumming. Now, that may seem negative, but actually it's quite positive. It's like, let our kids be bored. That was the message I read
Right.
there. And the other thing as well, started to look into it a bit further. And another great quote, which I think is my favorite, is, and now that we don't have to be good, we can be free. And I think the point there is take the pressure away of, continually having to overperform and reach a goal and just, enjoy what you're doing, and then you'll find freedom. So yeah, there you go. They're the two things that made me smile, and I thought were quite positive.
Awesome. I love that. It's great. I mean, I think the idea that we don't give ourselves time to basically stare out the window
Exactly,
and be
do nothing.
bored.
Yeah.
And this idea that it's almost like time and space just to think and allow things to emerge, as it were.
Get rid of the noise,
Yeah, exactly. So like allow yourself to be bored, because sometimes that's where creative ideas come from.
Yeah.
And so, thank you for sharing that. That's brilliant. And
No
so,
problem.
Paul, that's all I have for you today. I just want to say thank you. I tip my hat to you, your approach, because it feels it's very much focused on the customer and less about dragging, but traveling with, which it feels like a great thing. So thank you for sharing your time and your insights and your experience with me today. That's been awesome.
No problem at all. Thank you very much, Adrian. All the best.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.